How and why does a local company compete against global giants? That's what Bose Coffee, which started in Cebu, has been doing for years, competing against Starbucks, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and now Costa Coffee. Many local players in and out of the coffee industry have given up or gone into defensive mode, but Bose founder Steve Benitez has lined up new cash, new partners, and a plan to step up expansion. Steve, thank you very much for welcoming us here.
Hi Coco, welcome to our home.
How often do you get to visit stores now?
Well, as much as I could, I visit 1 or 2 stores every day just to check on the condition and how the whole experience is.
And how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
At least 3.
So when you visit these stores, do you always order a coffee or not necessarily?
Oh yeah. I always take a cup and taste it at least.
I mean, obviously now you are passionate about coffee, but before you thought about this as a business, were you already hooked on it?
Yes, I was. It all started when I was taking up law, and I had to stay awake for a long time to study, and that's when I started drinking coffee, just to keep awake. After that law school experience, I started traveling around the world, and every place that I visited, I would always end up in a coffee shop. That's because I really like the experience. It's my way of trying to immerse in that local culture wherever I may find myself. And I find that in a coffee shop. I personally feel that in that short span of time, I could actually feel the local culture.
And then you left law school here to go back to Cebu, help your father in his business. Eventually you entered into some other food business. But between that and putting up Bose Coffee, where was the light bulb moment that you wanted to get into the coffee business?
In one of my trips abroad, I found myself in a coffee shop, and I was on my way back home to the Philippines the next day, and I said, I'm going to miss this experience again. And I only had the chance to visit coffee shops when I traveled abroad. And I felt at that particular time, I could remember it was in an al fresco cafe back in Southern California. And I said to myself, why do I need to wait for another trip abroad? Why don't I actually bring this experience back home to my community? That was a light bulb moment. And I studied that for 2 years after, that was back 1994. And it took me 2 years to really immerse myself in the coffee culture, learn about the beverages, until I felt comfortable and confident that I could serve the perfect cup of coffee.
So you start in Cebu in 1996. A couple of years later, Starbucks enters the Philippines. At that point, did you think, maybe I should just quit while I'm ahead?
Well, you know, as an entrepreneur, I think it's natural for us to take on challenges. So at that time, I felt I had 2 options, whether I step back or should I take on the challenge and move forward. And obviously, I took the second option, and I said, I'm going to go proceed and move forward and make this concept even bigger. One of the things that makes us, or made me more confident, is because we offered something very different from what Starbucks offered or the other foreign brands offered. We were highlighting Philippine coffee, and that's something that made it very clear between us as a Filipino brand and them as foreign.
Because when you look at globalization, you have these big foreign brands that can enter different countries and often just take over the whole industry there. And you have your competitors here, whether it's Starbucks or Coffee Bean or now Costa, 2 of those backed by big local groups. How do you compete against all of that arsenal?
Bose is the Filipino coffee company that highlights Philippine coffee. And so just by that fact that we promote and we showcase Philippine coffee and we position ourselves as the Filipino coffee chain, separates us from them. We offered something different that they do. So let me give you an example. One of the things that we really highlight in Bose is our Philippine coffee. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to uh, introduce, or if you're a foreigner and you come to the Philippines, I'd like to tell you more about the Filipinos through our coffee. And if you were a Filipino, you come into our stores, I'd like to let you know more about our history, or a little bit more about where coffee comes from, a little bit more of our country through our coffee. And that's something that these other brands don't do.
Whom does that appeal to?
Well, to a certain market that we at which we target, right? So foreigners get interested about that. People write about it, and they get the first introduction to our coffee through about the Philippines to our coffee shops. For example, in Cebu, there would be we would have Korean tourists come to our stores because they found about it from other Korean tourists who came here before them, and so that created a little bit more of interest. That
What's the draw for them? And you said it's a certain market.
well, the draw for we there is an emergence of young millennials who appreciate more about Philippine pride or nationalism. There's a certain market that appreciate that, and we initially target these people who appreciate local brands and appreciate Philippine coffee. Let me tell you this: once you know more about Philippine coffee, the tendency is for you to learn more about it, and you love it more.
What's the starting point for many people about learning about Philippine coffee? What interests them about Philippine
Well,
coffee?
first of all, our Philippine coffee, in terms of taste, tastes a little bit different. There's a certain distinct taste, especially if you drink a Barako or a Robusta from Cavite. There's a certain strong taste that goes with it. That immediately when you taste it, Barako. We have Filipinos coming from abroad, taking home our coffee with them to wherever they come from, and that's very distinct to what we offer.
So a lot of people get to know that difference,
Not
able to tell that difference.
If you're not a connoisseur, maybe not, but there's just a certain strength in the way we do our coffee in Bose, which I personally I give attention to it because that's how I like it. And over these years, the market likes what I like. So basically, I think that's why it works.
From my understanding of coffee house culture, people go to these coffee shops as much for the coffee as for the ambiance they have here. It's a place for them to meet their friends, a place for them to work. How do you differentiate yourself on that plane versus some of the competitors?
Well, when you come to Bose, one of the things that we really focus on is to be able to tell our story through our coffee. So when somebody comes in here, when somebody comes in here, and you would actually know where your coffee comes from. So we highlight different areas where your coffee comes from. So Benguet, Sagada, and in the south you'll have Mount Apo, Kitanglad. These are all from Mindanao, and Mount Matutom. And what we're trying to do is to be able for people to be able to know and trace where the coffee comes from. For me, that's a way for us to be able to make people appreciate more the coffee that they drink. One of the things that we do in Bose is to try to integrate our way of giving back through the social entrepreneurs that we tie up with, and so that's how we build that ecosystem, right?
This includes the coffee or the chocolates that you sell downstairs?
Yes. So we around 5 years ago, one of the things that I tried to make sure is giving more meaning to why we're growing. So the more stores we open, I had to find a reason why we had to do that. And so I met a social entrepreneur who gave me that idea when she said that having Bose as an account made her business sustainable. And I felt that at that time that this particular business model was very powerful in a way that just by doing what we're doing, we're actually creating positive impact with the people that we do business with. And so I tried to expand that relationship with other social entrepreneurs, even beyond coffee social entrepreneurs. And over the last 5 years, we've had maybe more than 6 partners, and we monitor all of this impact that we've done with them. And so just to give you one specific instance, the lemongrass tea that we procure from a social entrepreneur, his name is Jamir. When we started getting from them, people who were making the tea were working only one day a week. When we started to increase that procurement and we made the tea more popular, now these people work 4 days a week or even 5 days a week, just to comply our requirement. So, in other words, it's a platform. We're not opening just coffee shops. I mean, one of the things that make us different is that every store that we open, we're opening a platform to create and sustain and to build more communities that these social entrepreneurs actually support.
How does that help the company?
In what sense?
So you help the social entrepreneurs. How does it help you?
Well, not directly. I mean, it's part of our social responsibility, and I think what it helps us in a way, because then people look at us not just purely a business enterprise, but actually one of the things, or what I normally say is, we try not to do well, we try to also do good. And I think people appreciate that. And what we've seen is the growth in the business, So if people like, the millennials actually find some relevance in that.
So is it a very millennial market? So older Filipinos or older potential customers, it doesn't appeal to them as much?
No, it does. We did a study.
How do you reach them?
We did a study, and the yuppies are the ones who appreciate more the things that we do. So
what are yuppies? Are these 30s?
The early jobbers,
okay,
which is around 22, 25, and the yuppies 25 to 35. They're the ones who appreciate actually the things that we do. And the ones who beyond those, the Gen X, sometimes really don't, sometimes don't really care.
You could have gone another way and gotten the license for one of these brands instead of continuing Bose. Did you think about that?
No, I think not only because I didn't believe in the idea, but because I also had no resources to do that. I mean, I think one of the things that push people to do things is the lack of resource. I mean, and the belief that what they're doing is going to work. I didn't have enough resource. I had only enough money to start one small coffee shop. And I think I've shared this with you before. It's one of my frustrations because I'm exposed to the retail industry, and I've seen a lot of foreign brands coming into the Philippines, and some of these brands are not even known abroad. And the surefire formula for some of the entrepreneurs is bring a foreign brand, and 90% it will work, just because it's a foreign brand. For me, I'm very much frustrated with that kind of model or that kind of thinking, because somehow it stifles the creativity of the Filipinos. I mean, the Filipinos, for me, I believe, are one of the most creative people in the world, and that's one thing that we try to do, to showcase here in Bose. Now, Bose is 100% run by Filipinos, created by Filipinos, managed by Filipinos. And when you enter our stores, we really try to show the best of what the Filipinos are.
A lot of other players, not just in your industry, but whether in the garments industry or any other industry, have all tried to compete against foreigners. I'm sure many of them are as creative as you. but many of them have either scaled back or just gone on defensive mode. If one of those were to talk to you and ask you, how does one do this? What would you tell them? How does one compete against global brands?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think the big word for me is focus. You need to focus on what your strengths are. You need to focus on one particular goal and don't get distracted by what's going around and what everybody else is doing. So our focus is to establish Bose as a Filipino coffee company, highlighting Philippine coffee, showcasing what's the best about the Filipinos. Filipinos who are warm, friendly, happy people, and we try to exhibit that through our service.
That's one of your mantras, right? Happy people.
Yeah. Because Filipinos are generally one of the happiest people in the world. And so we'd like to show that as well. You need to focus and continue on building on your strengths. I think that's, if I was going to give a tip or an advice, I think that's my biggest takeaway.
You've gotten a new partner, so they bought out your partner, and they injected some cash into you. And you're going to open abroad, but you're also going to open your 100th store. How big of a milestone is that, the 100th store?
It's a big milestone. We've been in business for 21 years this year, and starting off from a business that had a capitalization of 150,000 pesos, with a small cart, 6 tables. With four baristas, I trained myself, and going towards 100 stores and beyond. That's a big milestone. For retailers, I think 100 store is a benchmark. It's a good benchmark that you're moving forward.
So it took you 21 years to get there. How many years to the next 100?
Slowly but surely. The idea is to be able to get to the next 100 in 3 years.
Okay. And the new partners should help with that.
Yes.
How has that changed running the company?
It made our organization more professional. It made our processes more systematic. It made our systems more efficient, and so that's a big help. It also put our governance in place.
Because before you essentially just had to report to you and your partner.
Yeah.
Now there are more people who are interested.
Yes. Yes. So that's a big help. I think those are things that we need to work on this year to take us on to the next 5 years.
The third thing is you talked earlier about how you needed to solidify yourself in Cebu before you came to Manila. This year the plan is to go abroad, open your first store abroad. It's going to be in Qatar. Why do you want to go abroad?
Well, the one in Qatar this year is a commitment we made the last 2 years. I mean, if I was going to follow our plan, globalization is supposed to take place in 2020. We have a 5-year plan, and each year there's a theme that I follow. So last year, the first year was a formational year where I formed a team of people who will take us to the next level. I hired the best people. I put in a new office. I got a new partner. These are the formational year. That all happened last year. This year is the foundational year, where we put all our foundations in place, systems-wise, location-wise, people. Next year is I call it the sustainable growth year, and the 4th year is the optimization year, where we optimize everything that we built the last 3 to 4 years. And the 5th year is the globalization. That's when we should be ready to take on bringing the brand to the other places. Why do I want to take Bose out of the Philippines? Exactly because I want to showcase what the best of the Philippines. That's number 1. Number 2, I want to bring Philippines closer to the people, to the Filipinos who work abroad. So when they go to Bose Coffee in wherever areas they live in, they feel closer to home. And the third is I want to expose global markets to Filipino coffee. You know, we've been working for, we've been working on this for the last 21 years, but it's taking shape only starting off this year to, and hopefully realize in the next 4 years.
Steve Benitez, thank you very much for this time today.
Thank you, Coco.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Steve.